Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, Chief of Department of the Lakewood, New Jersey Fire Department, Jonathan Yahr. Chief, third time's a charm, brother.
Yeah, we finally got together. Yep. I'm glad.
You and I have been trying to do this. Our paths crossed several months ago, working on the fire and safety services calendar for 2024, which I want to talk to you a little bit about that project. But that's how we got to meet. Didn't know anything about you before we got down to Lakewood, and spent the day with you documenting one of your engine companies for the calendar project we did this year. And then you and I got to sit down and do also the behind the department video, which was great, where we talked about your department, what's happening there, obviously the fast-paced growth you're having, and so on. So I want to hop into all that today. But first off, man, just thank you. I really enjoyed my time that day in Lakewood. I go to a lot of fire departments. I talk to a lot of chiefs, a lot of firemen. You guys were a standout in all my years of doing this, and I know it comes from the top down. I know you don't do well with compliments, but there was a lot of great information and comments received when we put out the content working with you and both videos that we did with you. And it's because you guys have a strong structure in place, and it comes from a chief that I believe truly lets his people work and be firemen.
Yeah, that's a big part of it is letting your guys do the job. You know, if you trained them correctly, they're going to do the job correctly. And that's always been my mantra. I've done everything I could to not be a micromanager, because I hated working for guys that tried to manage every single moment of your day. And, you know, it comes from, I guess, my upbringing and, you know, and my experiences throughout my life that have brought me to that point. And, you know, and I hope to carry on and the mantra of leave it better, you know, than when you found it. And that's what I've been trying to do.
It has a lot to do with your own confidence, though, right? Like as you come up through as a firefighter to a company boss, to the chief of department, you can't lose track of your people and what the job's truly all about. And I know firsthand, I watched the relationship you had with your guys. I've seen the process. I saw the end result, the apparatus that you guys are building there, the relationships you have with the township to continually build out a department that represents the municipality. I mean, these are all things that truly come from a deeply rooted guy that just loves the fire service and enjoys his people.
You got it. I mean, my only dream that I can look back to, maybe when I was, I would say 12 or 13 years old, was to be a fireman. I never even aspired to be an officer. I just wanted to be a fireman. And I think once I became a fireman, even on the volunteer side, I felt like I was, you know, and I don't want to say that in that way, even on the, as I became a fireman, I was a volunteer first. And to me, I had attained my dream, you know, being that, you know, becoming a volunteer fireman. That was my dream. I feel like that's where I always wanted to be. Even in the volunteer service, I never really wanted to promote up. It took me a long time to look towards promoting up, even on the volunteer side. And then when I became a career fireman, I was, you know, my dream just elevated even higher. Wow, you mean I get to do this and get paid for it? You know, because
did you grow up in it?
So, didn't really grow up in it. So, but it was in my blood, so to speak. My grandfather was a fireman in Ladder 27 in New York from 1938 till 1969.
Cross Bronx Express.
Yep. So he didn't talk a lot about it. A matter of fact, I really, growing up, didn't really even, I knew my grandfather was a fireman. There was a Maltese cross in the back of his car, but I didn't really think much of it until about I was 12 or 13 years old. And I was 13, 14. So I was going into high school, and a friend's father was in the Lakewood Fire Department as a volunteer. And, you know, I heard a little bit about it and thought about it. And then my neighbor joined the volunteers you know, I was 15 or 16. And we went over there one night for a poker night, you know, just to hang out at the firehouse and play poker. Because they used to hang out on Friday and Saturday nights. You know, it was a big thing. The firehouse was the center of the town, pretty much. You know, that was what, you know, everything revolved around the fire service. And that's when it kind of lit the fuse, so to speak, and I was off to the races. There was nothing else I wanted to do more than that from 15 on. I remember, I want to say from being 15 to 18 took about 100 years, because I wanted to be 18 and join the fire company so bad. So I remember that it was the longest 3 years of my life. And once I joined, that's what I said. I had felt that I was successful. I could have stayed in the volunteer fire service my whole life and felt successful. There are guys. What is it? 90% of all fire departments in the country, or 85% are volunteer. There are
Yeah.
guys doing it. Have guys and girls doing it every day, day in and day out, on the volunteer side for no compensation. And it's amazing. And I did it. And I know why. The compensation is your mental well-being and health. I feel like we're all a little bit crazy, but that seems to temper the crazy. And I always liked that part of it, just stopping at a moment's notice and responding. That to me was what it was all about, and I remember that. And at that time, I guess I remember my grandmother telling my grandfather I was joining, and my grandfather, talked to me a little bit about it, wanted to see what gear we were wearing, because he was out. He actually, so he had a heart attack on a job in
Mm.
'69, and he was put off the line. So he only lasted till '71. He got moved to the division office, and he couldn't stand being stuck in an office.
Right.
So
Like
I think
most
that's where I
firemen.
get it from. Because if I swiped you around in my office here, it's a disaster, because I'm never in my office. I am not an
Right.
office guy. I'm not this impeccable organizational skilled guy. I'm hands-on. I've always been hands-on. I was a hands-on learner growing up. So he couldn't stand it. So he retired in '71 from FDNY. So it, he was 21 years out of the fire service when I joined. But
Yeah.
neither my dad nor his two brothers, really got involved in it. And I don't know why. My dad ended up working for the phone company. He worked for Bell Telephone, and my uncle, he was he was in the Navy, and ended up becoming an office guy. And my other uncle he was the free spirit. He was all over. And
Yeah.
none of them ended up in the fire service. And my grandfather was a first generation fireman. He came over when he was young, and ended up I think they moved to Pennsylvania, and then they moved to the Bronx. So he lived and worked in the area where he worked where he lived, which was something my dad talks about. My dad talks about going to the firehouse, and I think my dad probably would have enjoyed being a fireman, because he talks about
Yeah.
the firehouse fondly.
Right.
It would have been a different scenario for me then. I think it would have changed. It would have been even more. I think it would have been even more in my blood. And
Yeah. Or you could have been turned off by it.
yeah,
The
that's the
absentee
other
of your
side it.
father, not being home a lot, being hurt, not being there. You
Yep.
know, I mean, you
Yep.
look at how it goes today, and this is a conversation that needs to be had more of, but you look at how many guys today don't expose their kids to the fire service, or want them to do more than
Yeah.
be firemen or be
Yeah.
firefighters. And
Yeah.
that's weird to me, because I just remember growing up, the firehouse was full of kids all the time. Guys brought their kids around to the
That's
picnics and the parties and
Yep.
exposed them to it. And that's what we knew. Like, we couldn't wait to get over to the firehouse when we were invited to be there. And now you look at it, and I think about a lot of the guys that I ride the trucks with. They don't expose their kids to it. Their kids are not interested. They're not involved. They don't join at 16 in the volunteers as a junior, or 18 as a probationary member. And so I wonder why. I wonder why we don't want that for our own kids. I don't know.
I don't know. And that goes back to right. It's a quote everyone's used, the Edward Croker quote, right?
Right.
In the eyes of most, it looks like it's not a noble profession. But we judge it is. And that was what I always looked at, to be a fireman, right? Just to be a fireman. It seems lowly to most people. And I think even in this day and age, it still is looked at as a little bit more of a lowly profession. Yes, there are a lot of people that look up to us and stuff, but a lot of people don't want their children to get involved in it. I have 6-year-old twins. All right. I have 2 older daughters and 6-year-old twins, boy, girl. And my son is all about the fire service. Right now, he's currently going through his Ghostbusters thing.
Right.
He wants to be a Ghostbuster. So I think he wants to be a Ghostbuster more than a fireman, but that's okay, because he can be whatever he wants to be right now, because he's 6. And,
That's right. We'll get him back.
Yeah,
we'll get him back.
That's it. And I think about that. It was funny. He come home sad from school the other day, and he's like, "Dad, I said, did you have a bad day at school?" He said, "Yeah." He said, my friend Preston said I can't be a Ghostbuster because there's no ghosts left." And I remember saying to him, "John, you can be whatever you want to be. Don't let your friends tell you what you can be. You can be whatever you want to be. Right now, if you want to be a Ghostbuster, you can be a Ghostbuster." And that's his that's his thing right now. He loves the fire service. He has all kinds of fire trucks.
Cool.
He knows fire trucks, and I want him to earn his keep if he does decide to join. I want it to be his choice. I don't want to make that choice for him. And that's important.
I'm dealing with it right now, Chief.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yep.
I'm just showing the Chief for people listening to this. I'm showing the Chief a picture. My daughter Lily, she's my youngest of 4, decided to join. And this was last month. And she was talking about it for a while. And then she, a couple months ago, she said, "I want to do it. What's the process?" And I didn't pressure her. I've exposed my kids. All my kids have been very exposed to the fire service because it's so important to me.
Yeah.
And they know what it's done for me. They know how important it is to me. And so I wonder if that scared off the others. I don't know. But my youngest, who's very much like me in personality and outgoingness and all of that, she wanted to do it. And so I said, I was just elated and so happy that she wants to challenge herself.
We only hope they get the same satisfaction that we got out of it, and that's it. And that's why we want them to make the decision on their own to join. I don't want my son or any of my daughters to feel like they're pressured to join a fire service. But I do.
That's right.
I do want them around. I love having them come around. My son looks at my old crew that I used to work for me on the engine as his friends. And, as so much so that he's a star student next week. And he wants, "Dad, can all the guys come to my school for show and tell?"
I love it.
We're going to try and make it happen for him. But, he's got pictures on his star student board of all the guys because to him, they're his friends. They're the same age. There's no difference. Yeah. And that to me is what the fire service is about. It's about family. It's about your bigger family, and if you keep both sides separate, my dad talks about going to the firehouse and my dad talks about backing the rig in and hitting the back of the bay. That was what he did, and damaged the truck and the bays, and he wasn't even a fireman, but he ended up backing the truck in like every one of us has done and hitting some, and these are the things that we heard about as kids. Now, my grandfather was very quiet about the calls he went on. We could only imagine. We could only imagine the calls that he was on. He was
there during the war years.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Hired in 71.
Yeah, he was hired in 38 and retired.
And he's
in 71.
in 27 truck, which was right in the heart of it.
So a sidebar to that is, let me see. I might have it here. So anyway, a gentleman from 27 truck ended up coming to my swearing in when I became chief. The guys pulled strings and got a hold of somebody. And Mark from 27 truck, I think he's the Bronx trustee now for the UFA. He comes down. So he comes down. We ended up going back and forth. We talk all the time now, on Facebook and stuff. And he's always tried to invite me up there, and I never could get up there to have dinner with the guys. I'd love to go up there and see the guys and talk shop. Really, that's what we'd like to do. He sends me a message about a year ago and says, "Hey, I think you might want to see this." And it's an article from Medal Day back in 1951, and there's my grandfather's name. So my grandfather didn't receive the medal. One of his peers received the medal, but he was on the ladder and took the kids down from this building. And I showed it to my dad, and my dad had no knowledge of it.
Wow.
So my dad,
that's cool.
Yeah, my dad, my uncle, and actually my aunt, my dad's youngest sister, she actually cried when she read it. She's like, "I've never talked to Dad about what he did. He never talked about it." And I go back to sitting in my grandparents' kitchen one day when I was 19 years old, before my grandfather passed away. And he was telling me some stories about fires that he went to. And a couple of years later, he passed away. And my grandmother pulled me aside. I used to mow her lawn for her. I used to drive all the way to Hamilton Township and mow her lawn every week.
Right.
She was a great, strong woman. She hadn't driven a car since before she was married, and she got right back in the car and started taking it out for, getting going to get groceries and stuff after my grandfather passed away. She told me that that was the first time she heard any of those stories. So
Wow.
he talked to me because he felt like, even as a fireman, a young fireman, he told me some stories that he probably talked with other firemen about, but never talked about it at home.
Yes.
So that was an aha moment to see how, the old guard used to keep their families separated from the horrors of it, but also brought them around the firehouse, because firehouse was life. I believe back in that day, talking to him, he worked 6 days a week.
Oh
They,
yeah.
they worked six
Yeah.
days a week. He had Sundays off. So
Right.
he was in the firehouse. He had an hour break for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and would go home for an hour, and then he was off on. And I know he was there for all the schedule changes right up and through to what they have now. The 25 group system, I think, was the last schedule that he worked. They moved out of the Bronx in the late 50s. So my dad has great
Wow.
stories. My dad has great stories about sneaking in the Bronx Zoo and all stuff like that. So
Yeah.
he had a good childhood, riding around on the subway all over the city in the 50s. He was 12, 13 years old, him and his brothers riding around the subway all over the city. And my grandmother finding out because somebody in Manhattan saw them in Manhattan, and as big a city as it was, they were in
Yeah.
trouble because they were where they shouldn't have been. So that was good. And that's kind of it. That's what puts it in your blood. I feel like I have a connection to the New York City Fire Department. I feel like nobody does brotherhood better than them.
Yeah.
I've been to a couple line of death funerals in the last couple of years, and to see those guys there. We were actually talking to the guys there from that funeral unit, and we're like, "Oh, you guys on light duty?" They're like, "No, we all volunteer to do this," and like nobody does brotherhood better. They are the best when it comes to that, and I try to emulate that, here and with my guys and everything. They're what makes the department. The firefighters are what makes the department. I joke with my guys. I was like, even if I don't show up, you're still going to put the fire out. They know what to do. They know what to do. I just try and make their job safer for them, and do it what they need, on the top. Get them the
But
tools they need.
it's fostering an environment that allows for that, right?
Yes.
I mean, firefighting is all about initiative, right? We got to know when to take initiative. We need to know where to be 3 steps ahead of when we need to be there. And to do that, it's not a permission driven, organization. We need our people to know when to act and how to act.
Yep.
And we need to give them the tools up front to be able to do that. And that is where the culture really matters,
Yep.
right? I mean, I know in Lakewood, with you at the helm and with incredible people, working with you, you have quite the culture there where you promote firemanship. It matters.
Yeah, we're trying to do that. That's what we want. I tell my guys all the time, if I'm not there, you make the decision you need to make. You are working with the available information that you have at that time. When I get there and I assume command from you, if it's a decision that I didn't like, I'll just change it and make it work for me. But I'm not going to second guess what you made because I wasn't there.
That's right.
I wasn't there. There are things that come into, your decisions are based on your experiences, right? What you see and hear and feel now, and what you've been through in the past. So some decisions are right, some decisions are wrong, but the best thing we can do is make a decision and stick with it. Make that decision.
We got to do that. We can't penalize our people for making decisions, because when we create an environment like that, nobody's going to make any decisions anymore.
They're paralyzed with fear. They will not act, and we want our people to act. We want them to act. I heard it from somebody, and I'm going to repeat it. And again, nothing I say today or for the future is any of it is mine and mine alone. Most of the stuff is a collection of stuff that I've heard through the years. But I love the thought of, I want my firemen to be, balls to the wall, right? Just enough that I have to pull the reins back on them. Right.
Yes.
So I want them to be more aggressive than I really would like them to be. But at the fire scene, I want to just pull back on the reins slightly, because I know that if I need to let go of those reins and let them do what they have to do, they're going to do it. And I'm pulling back on them slightly just to restrain them just enough so that I feel like they're operating in a safe environment, and and it's as safe as we can do, because you can go to every training. You can be the best fireman in the best shape, and shit can go wrong and you'll end up dead. You know, everyone does their job right, and something can happen that takes you
Yeah.
out. And
Yeah.
it happens. You know, it happens every day. We see it every day. You know, I don't think the general public understands that. You know, it is much safer than it used to be. You know, it was a much, much more dangerous occupation years ago, but it is not safe by any means the way it is now.
No, and we're having more examples of that today than I can ever remember.
Yeah.
I mean, the last couple line of duties across the country, you know, take heart attacks out of it, right? Medical things, things
Yeah.
like that. But you know, the explosion down in Virginia, right? And
Yeah.
then we had there was another one that just stands out to me not too long ago. But there's been several now where they're doing their job that they've done 1,000 times before, but it went south. Something went sideways.
Yeah, you know, funny thing is, I remember saying to you, I said it's funny how the world revolves around Lakewood for some reason, and it's the center of the universe. We joke about that all the time. The first arriving rescue had one of my old volunteers on it.
Really?
In Loudoun County.
In Loudoun County.
Yep. So one of my guys that started volunteering here, he actually started with my brother-in-law, Kevin. He was on that first arriving rescue, and they made 2 grabs. They made 2 grabs there. So, you know, I couldn't be more proud of him and his crew. I don't even know his crew, but I know him and who he is as a fireman. We fought a few fires together, and we had a good time, some laughs. And I'm very proud of him and what he did. And you know, I talked to him for about an hour and a half, 2 hours the day after, you know, because he was questioning some things about what they did. And you know, always the hardest critic. He was the hardest critic, and I've always been
part of the process.
I've always been my worst critic, and that's what I tried to explain to him, you know, and you know, he did a great job. He actually came up. So my brother-in-law Gabe and him were very good friends in high school, and they worked together afterwards for Kevin's dad. And he came up a couple of days ago and hung out with Gabe, and you know,
Nice.
they went to the firehouse. They hung out with the guys just to, you know, talk a little bit, you know, diffuse that whole situation. And poor Kevin leaves and witnesses a rollover on the Garden State Parkway and has to pull somebody out of a car. He can't win. He can't win. So he's a little black cloud, but he's doing good things. He's doing good things down there, you know, and I'm happy for him. I'm proud for him. You know, I'm proud that he found his way down there. I really am, you know, and it just makes me feel better because he learned our way first, you know.
There is something to be said for that. I'm very proud of our volunteer house here. We put out career firefighters all the time.
Yep.
And so that means, that tells me that these kids came in at 16, 18 years old, impressionable, and we were able to give them an impression that the fire service is a good place to be. Yeah. And in fact, they want to turn it into a career.
Yeah, exactly. And
there's something to be said for that.
Not everyone's cut out for it, and not everyone wants it. I know I have a lot of firemen. I have volunteers on my side that they love being volunteer firemen, and I think that's great. You know, there's a nobility in that for sure. That you know, that really makes them, you know, unique. That they love giving back to their community, and they love their other jobs. They love their careers. So
yes,
there's room for that. There has to be room for that. The fire service would die without volunteers. There's no doubt about it. You know, I never really understood the career versus volunteer thing. You know, when the fire's burning, it don't care. You know,
doesn't matter.
And I love both sides of my department wholeheartedly in different ways. You know, because some guys are here collecting a paycheck and working, and other guys are here because of what they do. Now, that doesn't mean they're not one and the same. Because I have guys that are collecting a paycheck that are like, wait, you mean you pay me for this? This is right. I can make money doing this, you know, and I would do this for free, you know, and those are the guys that are into the job. I've always been into the job. The job has been my life. My life has revolved around it, you know, my entire life. Even being young, I started out as an auto mechanic. That was my thing. I loved cars. I loved working on cars. You know, and I was an auto mechanic for a few years, and then moved up, and I got a job with the Federal Fire Service.
Right.
And I worked for the federal government. I can tell you, I probably worked more shifts than the only people that work more shifts than me are federal firemen that work 25 years, because I don't know how they do it. The 72-hour work week there.
Yeah.
I couldn't last. Moving to a municipal department, I probably added 15 years to my career. Those guys, they get towards their 20-year, 25-year, and they're counting down the days worse than
I can't
anyone
wait
I've
to
ever
get out.
seen, because it's half your life. And,
Yep.
and they get a lot of credit. It's tough to work for the federal government, that's for sure. And those guys, I knew a lot of good firemen, and that was my first. That was really my first look outside of my town. You're in your town, and I am so glad I got that opportunity. Those 8 years opened my eyes and changed my perspective to the way other people do things. That's one of the things I know, that the fire service is very regional, right?
Oh yeah.
Very
It's
regional.
local.
Right?
Firefighting's local.
Local, right? We don't even speak the same language
Right.
as the other side of the country, let alone 2 counties over. We can't even all decide on the same thread for fire hydrants and apparatus, and it's very local.
Yeah, I look at the flip side too, right? I mean, obviously, it's how we do it is how we do it, right? You said that before about your guy that went down to Loudoun County. It was a proud moment for you because you gave him his foundation. The other flip side of that, right, is that you need to get out, though. You need to go see what's happening outside of your own zip code. I know firefighting's local, and I know that we all work or volunteer for the best fire department in the world, right? Because we're all supposed to feel that way.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean we do everything right.
That's
and
right.
to expose yourself to what else is happening out there in the American fire service is important. But too many guys get caught up in this is how we do it and this is how we've always done it because this is all I know.
Yeah.
And they're not challenging themselves to go learn anything different.
Yep. Yeah. I've never been afraid to try new things. Right.
Yeah.
Try it. You may end up finding out it works out better. So, and that's one of the things we did here. We this department goes back to the 1880s. 1888 was the original foundation of this department. We actually predate the town by 4 years. So the town was actually a part of Bricktown until 1892. So from 1850 to 1892, Lakewood was just a village in Bricktown, believe it or not. And it broke away in 1892, but the fire department was 4 years old already. And, we have that tradition, goes all the way back to, they summoned the firemen back then with the church bells. The bell goes all the way back, right? So, we use a bell at funerals. The church bell is important. The bells go back. We ring the bell at funerals, just like many other departments. And that was how they were summoned back then. And, we run the full load there. They were a volunteer department all the way back to 1888. And somewhere in the teens or 20s, they hired a paid fireman, and his job was to keep the coal stove stoked in the firehouse. And he also would drive the truck to calls. Actually, he would hitch the team of horses to the rig at the time before they had.
That's cool.
So they never had any steamers in town. We never had a steamer.
Right.
We had hose carts, and there was one hydrant in town, buckets, and ladder trucks for rescues. They had a hand-drawn ladder truck, which is pretty cool. I would love to get a hold of it. I don't know.
You said it was 1880?
1888. Yep, 1888. Yeah. Yep. And actually, the fire department does have. So we have a historian that does a lot of digging, and he found some stuff back in the 1870s. So 1870, 71, where they tried to form a fire company. I think it was Oceanic Fire Company or for the town, and it failed. It failed after a few years due to lack of fires. Right. Yeah. Right? And they didn't have any major fires. Nothing really happened, and the town failed. But actually, that was what set the foundation, because the chief engineer in the new fire department was one of the guys that was working as part of the old fire department. So in 1888, it was after a fire in a house or a barn. It was a barn. They met in an office, a shop office, and talked about forming a fire company, and they did.
See that even back then, you get a fire, that you get the hook, right?
That's right. That's right. They all had to rush. Maybe their rush was a little more self-preservation for their town and a little more survival. Right. So, they had a little bit more at stake back then. I believe that their success was that only the barn burned down. Nothing else burned down. And you know what? We measure success relative, right? So back then,
Sure.
that was really important to them. They made a nice stop, and they wanted to continue to do that, and they did. They created a great fire company that lasted, on the volunteer side, it lasted until the 2000s. I joined in 1993. There was 150 men in this department. It was
Wow.
huge. It was huge.
Yeah.
There'd be
Yeah.
35, 40 people at every work and fire.
Now, when you joined Lakewood in '93, was there a career staff in place, or was it 100% volunteer?
There was.
There was.
Yep. There was 3 guys and a couple of
Yeah.
part-timers. So they worked by themselves in a small, it was like almost like an urban interface engine. So just a small, couple of booster lines on the rig, and those 3 guys had been working. So that was 1993. They had been working since 1962, and I think the 2 other guys, 1965. So,
Okay.
So they had been. There were some really, salty guys. One of our guys, one of those 3 is still in town. He was a volunteer up until a couple of years ago.
Very cool.
Very, very, very. I idolized him. He worked for the Forest Fire Service. This guy was a fireman's fireman. He did things by himself that I've seen fire companies fail to do. This guy, and
that's the type of conversations that I love, because there's so many guys like that from years ago.
This
man.
is the
They
guy
were
that
just men.
I remember crawling down a hallway and hearing this clear voice going, "Yo, bring that line over here." And I'm thinking, man, this guy's not on air. And there's Dick Wallace. There, hey, you need that line in here. Awesome. The bedroom's on fire in here. And he's somebody I looked up to my whole life. He was a guy that just did his job, never really complained about it. And if he still had the wherewithal today and the body to do it, he'd still be doing it. He's a great guy. I still have conversations with him day in and day out. And, there's a couple of guys in the volunteer department that I remember talking to one of the guys I got in. He was 84, 85 when I got in 93, right? This was Bud Soden, and everyone talked about Bud Soden. You want to know? Bud Soden.
They always had the best names, Bud Soden, right?
The best, right? Bud Soden was on the engine from Lakewood that responded to the Hindenburg.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that was your area. That's right.
Yes.
That happened down
there.
We
were the first centrifugal fire pump to arrive at the Hindenburg. So at that time,
That's wild.
Yeah. So the call went out when it happened. So they were there for a long time. So there's always been this talk about, Bud used to talk about going to the, riding on the rig and, getting with, back in the day, getting with the paid guy, and then they put the guys together. So back then, they talk about in the 50s, there was a fist fight that broke out at a Chief's dinner. And I might have my dates confused, but somewhere in the 50s, fist fight broke out. And it was all the old guys fighting.
Yeah.
And Bud told us that, the fist fight broke out because the paid guy was assigned Engine Company 1's engine. But in 1938 or 37, when the Hindenburg went down, Engine Company 1's rig was a chemical engine, didn't have a fire pump on it. So the chief at the time had ordered them to take Engine Company 2's rig that had a centrifugal fire pump on it.
That's not going to go over well.
Man, this fist fight in the 50s was because they took Engine 2's rig to the fire. So, and
fiercely loyal, fiercely protective.
Decades later, they were fighting over this.
We need an ounce. We need an ounce of that today in our people.
Yep, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And what's funny?
Who's maintaining this? Who's going to do this when you're gone? When you finally hang up your helmet and you retire, who's going to carry on these stories? Obviously, getting to know you. You have such a passion for the Lakewood Fire Department because you're born and raised there too, right? So you have that double connection. But who's going to take that from you? Because that's hard, man.
Yeah. Well, so we still have a lot of guys, younger guys, that have come in that came up through the ranks in the volunteer side, in the early 2000s and in the mid 2000s. So
We need them to understand how important these conversations
and we
are.
have these. We talk about this. We
Good.
talk about this all the time. The guys talk these stories all the time. We also, the guy who does our historian stuff, he was a volunteer fireman here. He has it all written down. He keeps a page, an unofficial historical page on
Good.
Facebook. So all these stories are written down, and they're
That's
there,
good.
which is great to read. And every now and then we get a picture he puts up that we've never seen. I've
Yeah, I
never
love
seen,
that.
which is awesome. It's awesome. There was a picture for a Christmas tree, and it was either the first aid building or one of the fire companies. And even my wife says, "Wow, that is a beautiful picture of a Christmas tree, a black and white photo of an old antique looking Christmas tree." And that's who we hope that takes these stories. Everybody else below us. Anybody that hears the stories, we hope would pass them on. And bring life to them, bring them to life.
Yes.
Because that's what Bud Soden did. He brought these stories to life to us because he was a
That's
firsthand witness. He talked about
That's right.
in the 50s and 60s, all the big hotels in Lakewood burned, and we don't have fires like they had. It just doesn't happen anymore. We have big fires, right? We're just like any other city department. We have big fires. We have fatal fires. We have a decent amount of fires, but the fires, I don't even think we as a fire service can comprehend. One of the Laurel and the
size and
Pines
magnitude,
Hotel,
right?
Yeah, the Laurel and the Pines Hotel in the mid to late 60s, they were on scene for 3.5 days.
Yep.
I don't even think we can comprehend that. The only fire I can think back is the paper factory up north, the Markel thing that even rivals a fire like that, or Jersey City, the cold storage fire that was next to the tunnel there. They were there forever.
The Holland Tunnel.
They were there forever. And
yeah, and you think about it, when they battled fires like that too, they didn't have the same equipment.
Yeah.
Technology wasn't the same. Our turnout gear, like these guys froze.
Yeah, I
you know what I mean?
Show you. Got this is, I want to see if I can get you to see it. This is one picture that, and I'll have to send you a thing of it. This is a picture that I got from Richie Erickson, our historian.
Yeah.
This was from a glass negative collection. And this is Main Street looking west, right? This fire here that's burning, the building that's burning, is the reason why they bought a ladder truck in town. Because they had to fight this fire. There's guys on the roof. There's guys on fire escapes. So to me, and it is a beautiful picture because it shows everybody watching. It shows the hose line stretch. It's just that overall view of a fire and what these guys had to work with. And some of the pictures of some of the fires that we've had in history here, I think that's what leads me to my passion is that these guys worked with so much and did so much. The firemanship was there. They had to learn how to do things with smaller hose lines. Everything was 2.5-inch hose. So larger hose lines on the hand line and smaller hose lines for supply. Their supply lines were much longer. All their stuff was very difficult back then. A lot of manual stuff.
Well, I love how protective you are of it, Chief. Where are we going? We got anything good? Wait.
Yeah, let me lower it.
I know. Yeah, good. No, you're fine. Listen, man. You're in a firehouse. It is what it is. I know how protective you are, and I just think that that's what's so important, that we make sure that the next guy, the next generation, is still protective. Somebody there is keeping track of these stories and documenting this. Yeah.
Yep. So and it's just funny because I was lucky enough to have a portion of my career be that of Dick Wallace and Bud.
Right.
So when I got hired in 2002 for the Federal Fire Service. Now, the Federal Fire Service sets themselves up almost like an ISO 1 department. We had 4 guys on a rig, an officer or an acting officer every day, and then I come to Lakewood and I was making $7.25 an hour, and I was the only guy. I trained for a few months, and they set me free because they had guys that were out hurt. And I got hired there in late 2002. So by April of 2003, I was responding to fires by myself. Right? You'd sit in a firehouse, and people would call the firehouse direct back then. We still had the old phone number, came right into us, and we'd actually have to call dispatch and tell them, hey, we're going over here. And we would get the phone calls of, because some of the senior developments, they had that one button push on their phone would dial the at that time 7-digit number, and they would call 363-0068, and you'd hear somebody coughing, saying, "I think my house is on fire," and we'd be where are you? I'm in my bedroom. I can't get out.
Yeah.
And we'd actually have to hang up on them because we had no way of transferring the phone to a dispatch or anything.
Yeah, right.
We said, we're on our way. We're on our way. And I would call.
We're on our way.
Yep, we'd call dispatch. And it was funny because when we left the building, we had to flip a switch. We all joke about the switch now. So we had to flip a switch so that the phone calls would be transferred to police headquarters. And
right.
Man, nothing made your heart sink more than when you pulled back into the firehouse and that you forgot to flip the switch. Oh, there was a little red light on it too. So you'd pull in the firehouse and your heart would sink because
I believe it.
There could have been a phone call. Alarm companies called us at that line. And that was one of the first things that as when I got promoted to captain and when we started to really build our department, I got rid of it. I'm like, we're going to permanently transfer that line to dispatch because that's what they do. They do a very good job of it. And we're going to let them handle answering the phones and tone us out. And, for a long time, we had a direct line. We had these pick and ring lines. So if I picked up this phone in the firehouse, it would ring in dispatch and vice versa. If they picked up the phone, it would ring in the firehouse. That's how we were dispatched. So,
and this was in the 2000s.
Yeah, this was in the 2000s. This was straight up through.
Not that long ago.
No, this really didn't change until after 2010, 11 is when we really changed. The phone thing is a running joke because I can tell you at 3:00 in the morning, I've answered my cell phone that wasn't ringing and looking at the phone that's ringing, not understanding what's going on. The guys joke with me because I've answered a glass of water.
Sure.
Phone rings, you pick up a glass of water. I've dumped it on myself because you're not awake. And it was it was an odd feeling. You also had this recurring dream that you heard the general alarm tones go out and you'd wake up and you actually thought, wait, did that happen? So you had no phone. You had no way. Right. The only way to know was pick up the phone and call dispatch and be like, did you just hit tones out?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Anywhere?
Yeah, no, you're not going anywhere. But you always had this recurring, and all the guys did it. You barely slept. It was hard to sleep in the firehouse because you were alone. And that was one of the first things I fixed when I became a fireman. There was we pushed hard. They hired extra people, so I was part of a group. So in 1994, the 3 older guys retired, and I was part of the group that was hired. So we had 3 guys hired in 1994 that worked through till we got hired. I got hired full time in 2010. Right. So I worked about 8 years, 7, 8 years, part time, but I was working a lot of shifts because it was just 3 guys and there was 2 of us that worked part time. I was working 2, 3 times a month, 4 times a month, sometimes, maybe even more. So, we got hired in 2010, 3 guys, and you think they'd put us on the same rig? Nope. They put us in another firehouse with another rig.
Of course.
Because, the call volume in 2002 was 700, and the call volume in 2010 was 1,400, 1,500. So
I want to talk about that a little bit, right? Because, talking with you and getting to know a little bit more about your story and the Lakewood Fire Department, the growth you guys are going through. You're talking about, yesterday and then your career, but where you are today it's a whole different animal. So you kind of talked about it before. It's a combination department, but the career side is much bigger than it used to be, and you guys continually expand. Give a little background about what you guys are dealing with, where it came from the 2000s and the 2010 to where we are today in 2024. It's a much different department than it used to be.
Yeah, and that was it. We were one guy. We were one guy on a rig responding to calls, and if we needed help, we either hit out a single company or a general alarm. And a general alarm summoned everybody, all 5 fire companies in town, all 5 volunteer fire companies in town. Back then, it was 4 engine companies and a ladder company, and they were all staffed. There was 20, 25 guys in every company. So, you really didn't worry about coverage. Guys showed up. You had rigs out on the road. It was, the mid 2000s, that 2007, 8 range is when it really started to change. Things started to change, and we'd hit out a general alarm, and we'd have 6 rigs show up, and there'd be 8 people on scene, and that was a problem. It ended up becoming a problem, because we were getting by the skin of our teeth. We as the guy working alone would respond to these structure fires by ourselves. And we get there and, hey, every house is occupied until we clear it, right? So
Right.
we'd put a pack on and we'd grab a booster line off the rig, or if it was a fire that we didn't think a booster line could handle, we'd pull an 1.75 inch was the only other line that was on the rig, and that very rarely got pulled. But I fought quite a few fires by myself, and let me tell you something.
Because what about the uncertainty of not knowing who's coming behind
That's
you?
right, not knowing, not knowing, and depending on where you were in town, it could be minutes or tens of minutes.
That's right.
And you went in, you learned a lot fast, right? You learned what didn't
Love
work.
that.
You learned what didn't work, and you learned what worked, and you had to do it all by yourself.
Yes.
Right.
There's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
When you got to wear many hats and make a lot of decisions quickly, setting the parking brake, to throwing the truck in the pump, to pulling a line, to putting on your own pack, getting in, making a search while pushing a line in, all by yourself, hoping that the next due is pulling up behind you.
Yep.
Those people are indoctrined very quickly and much more quickly than a staff department that can offer different guys for different tasks. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You can't take that away from them.
No, you definitely learn. Looking back, I'm glad I was in my 20s, because there's no way, in my 20s and 30s, you had the body to do the job, and you were almost too
There's still
stupid.
guys doing this today, though. There are departments out there that do this.
I laugh because we were too stupid to get hurt, right? We didn't know,
right?
We didn't know, and I joke about it. And we knew what we were doing, but it really wasn't until 2010, 11, 12 where I realized, we were 3-3, and they were hiring a captain. They hired somebody provisionally. They figured they needed somebody to do things, and nobody else wanted to take the test. We were a civil service department at that time. Still, we're a civil service town, and nobody wanted to take the test. The guy that they had provisionally hired ended up retiring because his back injury, which was very common for us back then.
Right.
And I went to take the test, and I took a class. A name that some people might know, Mike Turpak. I took his class.
Sure.
Amazing fire officer, firefighter, chief officer, from a very well-respected department, Jersey City, very well-respected department that did a lot during the war years. They had their own war years that not a lot of people know about. And, and they fought a lot of fires. And I remember coming back from his class. I took one of his promotional classes, and I came back and I thought to myself, I truly know nothing about firefighting. And it was an aha moment in my career. I wasn't well read. I didn't like reading. I never liked reading. Reading was not my thing. I wasn't great at it. My son's not great at it. My daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, can read books like she's in 4th grade. My son struggles through them, and I was the same way. I struggled through that stuff. And,
I get it.
My attention span's not good enough to sit around and read a book. But I remember him providing the library of books that you needed to read, and the first book, luckily, the first book I picked up was Collapse of Burning Buildings by Vincent Dunn.
Vincent Dunn, yeah.
I've read that book probably 5 times cover to cover. And I remember when I picked that book up and read it, I sat and read that book probably in 2 hours time from cover to cover. I was so enthralled in building construction and how he wrote the book. I am so glad I did not pick up Brannigan's Building Construction for the Fire Service. Because Brannigan's book is full of excellent information. It
would have put you to sleep.
It is the driest.
You would have never stayed with it.
It is the driest.
You would have never stayed with it.
I recommend every single firefighter in the world that fights fire picks up Collapse of Burning Buildings and makes that their first book, because it is a very easy read and it has so much information in it. And then that's just expounded. I've read all of Dunn's books, Norman's books, all the guys that count in the world. And I'm open-minded to everybody because everybody has a different perspective. I love Norman's perspective of the volunteer fire company he belonged to, bordered up to Queens. And he points out that if this house is on fire, it gets 4 engines, 2 trucks, a squad or a rescue, a battalion chief, and da-da-da-da-da. And this house right here, if it catches fire, it gets maybe 3 guys in the day. So
Yep.
So it's amazing, and he's got the perspective of both sides. We've actually brought him in to do seminar back in the day twice.
He's incredible. I had him on a
Yeah.
podcast a
Yeah,
while back,
incredible
and I
podcast.
just
Yeah.
I fangirled the whole time.
Yeah.
I think it was a
Yeah.
terrible interview
Yeah.
because I just
Huh?
sat back.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what to
Yeah.
do. I think that is so important. I'm glad you shared all that because I'm not well read either. I can't sit down and read a book, but I found that audio. I
Yes.
travel a lot in my car.
Yep.
Guys going back and forth to work, going back and forth during the day, whatever. Put something on in your car that you can just make yourself a little bit better.
Yep.
Listen to a podcast, get an audio book, and make yourself better because that's the stuff that matters.
And there's a lot of great podcasts out there about the first fire service. That's one of the things that's great right now is every single podcast that's out there has a different perspective on things and provides a different point of view on things. What you've done with the brotherhood and the
I lost you, Chief. What'd you say? You conked out on me there.
Okay.
Every podcast,
I said every single podcast that's out there has a different point of view on the fire service or a different niche in the fire service there, right? They what you've done with the brotherhood apparatus, all those things. That's what guys know this podcast for is I want to listen about, what the pulse of the fire service is in the rest of the world, right? There are other podcasts out there, the kitchen table, big departments. And then there's other smaller podcasts out there that are great. Listen to them all. You don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. There, and it's not a loyalty thing. It's the same thing as what we talked about earlier. Right? Getting out and getting perspective. Another guy I really look up to, and I'm proud to call him a personal friend is Aaron Fields. We brought him in. We brought him in, a while ago now. Now I'm looking back, it's probably 8-9 years ago. And he did nozzle forward for us for the whole thing. Yeah. Brought us a totally different perspective, what the left side of the country does, how they do things. What he sees in his district, it was eye-opening, to see what they dealt with and his history in the fire service and his dad and everything.
I think one of the best parts of that nozzle forward class is the day earlier with just the lecture portion where he talks about his own career, how they do it. But other than that, like dialect and communication and his content is just, super solid. And it's so unique in his approach.
He's one of the smartest individuals I've ever met. And he's also one of the most physically fit guys I've ever met. The guy's a bull. And he, it's so funny. I was working on my house years ago. And my phone butt dialed him. I ended up talking to him for an hour and a half. This is a guy that, and I was always afraid because Aaron he's the first one in my phone. I'm always afraid that, he's on Seattle time. If I butt dial him at 8:00 in the morning, it's not good, so, but it was, and I could pick the phone up and call him at any time, and it was funny because, he did a class for Bergen County Fire Academy. Morris County Fire Academy, not that long ago. One of the guys that came to our class from Ridgewood ended up.
That was actually our mutual aid, Mike, Matt Musicamp.
Yeah, Matt Musicamp.
Put that together.
So I talked to him quite a bit. He came to when we did Nozzle Forward, and he was always talking about bringing it up there. So So I on a whim, I said, you know what, Matt, I'll be up there. I want to participate, so I'll come. So the way Aaron runs his classes, if you went to one class, you can go to them all.
That's right.
So I called them up. They said, yeah, sure. No problem. You're invited. So I show up and there's Aaron comes walking in and walks right to me. And he's like, hey, what's going on, Chief? And I'm like, how'd you find out? He goes, oh, everything makes its way out here. So yeah, this is a guy, he knew that I had been promoted to chief without even, I hadn't talked to him since then, and I love that camaraderie and the brotherhood and, hearing him talk about his family and his dad and almost losing his dad in a fire. And, it's what brought him to where he is today. And some of his early experiences with, getting burned in a fire in another department that he worked in, I've listened to all that. And I know, I've dealt with the same thing. I had the same issue. I luckily didn't get burned, but I almost got trapped in a fire by an aluminum porch that melted behind me that I didn't know. And one of my
Yeah.
mentors in the fire service, one of the career guys that I started working with when I started here, was the one that got me out. Basically, yelled in the window and told me, "Get the fuck out of there!" You know, like you
Yeah.
can't be in there. And he pulled me out, and shortly thereafter, the entire porch collapsed, and I would have been trapped inside. So those are some of the things that I remember. You know, one of the hardest things, we're just thinking about, operating by ourselves. And back in 2012, we were still running one on one. And one of my lieutenants was also my partner fireman that day. And we got called. I remember a dispatch calling me and saying, "Hey, we think we have a fire. We don't know where it is. We're on the phone with the people." So, and they're in this area. So we start heading toward the area, and we come to find out that a woman had called 911. There was a dialect or a accent difference, and they couldn't. Her initial call went to Monmouth County. Monmouth County finally got that it was Ocean County, got it to Ocean County. Ocean County figured out it was Lakewood. They still didn't know it was a fire. They thought it was a domestic. They were sending
Yeah.
officers to a domestic. And when they finally got the word fire out of her, one of the cops said, "Hey, I smelled smoke back on Sterling Drive, Sterling Court." And he goes back over there and sees four members of a family out front, and they said their son was still inside. So we pulled up shortly thereafter, maybe 30 seconds thereafter. They were trying to throw a ladder to the window. I ended up put a pack on right away. I and we were trying to VES to get in the window. And I remember that night like it happened an hour ago. I can still smell the smells, and I can still hear everything that was going on, because it's one of those indelible marks that we threw the ladder up to the window, and I heard somebody yell, "Not that window." And at that point, I was like, well, that's the end of that. I'm not even going to mess with the ladder anymore. I just pushed my way up through this house. I went past the fire in the kitchen, and I ran into a 6-year-old boy in the hallway. And,
Mm.
it's, I pulled him out, and he didn't make it. So
Mm.
it was tough, because at that time, for some reason in my head, I thought, wow, this is a small kid. And he felt like my 3-year-old daughter. And I found out
Oh,
later on that he had autism, and he was small for his age. So it was a really tough day. And that was the one time in my career that the next morning I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. It was tough to get
yeah.
over. It's still tough to get over. We have had many,
Sure.
many, many fatal fires I've been on, and they're all ring true some ways, but this one was bad. And the mother, I couldn't get through my head. The hardest part of that fire was I couldn't get through my head. Why, how did this child crawl out of his bed in his bedroom and go towards the fire? Nobody goes towards the fire. Nobody ever crawls towards the fire. Although I found out from Sean and Alvaro from the Seton Hall fire that they crawled towards the fire too by accident. And I couldn't imagine, how he would have crawled towards the fire. And then we find out later on his mother had she was cooking in the kitchen. This was after Sandy, so there was power problems. And
Yeah.
she would cook at night, because they had 3 kids, and her kids all had autism. So there was something genetically between her and her husband that all the kids had severe autism. And she used to cook at night so that the kids could eat during the day, because they couldn't stand the smells of cooking. So she was doing everything she could. And the fire started behind the stove, because it was an electric stove, and there was a power problem with the house after Sandy. And she went in to wake the father up, the husband up, and he was in bed with the child. And she woke the other 2 kids, and she pulled the other 2 kids out. And the husband comes out, and he doesn't have the son with him that was in bed with him. He was too groggy, couldn't understand, what was going on. She went back inside and grabbed this child out of the bed and crawled down the hallway. And basically, when her clothing set fire, she let go of him, and went out of the house. So, you know, we that night was brutal.
Yeah.
And what was horrible is that myself and my firefighter with me, Jeremy, we shouldn't be here. we ended up putting this kitchen fire out. There was it was a bi-level home, so the kitchen's at the top of the stairs. I crawled past the kitchen, went down the hallway, and run into the kid in the hallway. I carry him out, and just as I'm carrying him down the hallway, here comes Jeremy with a line, because he was a younger guy, and the only thing I said to him was get a line on that fire, and he stretched the line by himself. He went back to the rig, charged the line, and I'm coming down to the stairway with this, and here he comes with the line, and he starts putting water on the fire, and I'm able to get past him and get down, and I hand the child off to a police captain that was outside, and I remember him, he was basically like, ow, ooh, ah, ah, because the child was so hot, and I at the time I didn't know if the child was going to make it or not, and if Jeremy hadn't been there, I don't even know if I would have gotten down the hallway. I might have had to pull myself into a room, and get into refuge, but he did what he was supposed to do. We put the fire out, and just outside the kitchen was a gas grill with 2 propane cylinders in the house. So neither of them got hot enough to vent, thankfully. But we were probably 30 seconds away from them venting, because the water was basically boiling on the containers when he hit it. And so we probably, we both said, wow, we through a strange luck, both of us are still here. And we get to live to fight another day. And it was a tough night. That was that one time that I was like, wow, I really don't think I want to do this anymore, because, up until that point, having kids was fun. We dealt with, everyone talks about it, dealing with kids in fires, dealing with kids in accidents. That's the hardest part. This was incredibly difficult night. And, I vouched at that point to never put another crew in a situation like that again, because we didn't have enough people to do the job. At that point in time, I said, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this? And the administration in the department at the time was very antiquated, didn't want to change things. Luckily, that was at a point where we were in flux. Our business administrator had resigned or retired, and we were starting to move forward. So that was the point where I said, we need to do something, and we pushed hard from them. It took till 2014 till we got another person for each vehicle. And in 2014, we got another person for each vehicle. But that was the aha moment that said to me that I will never put my people in that position, ever. I do everything I can so that they're not in that position, because I know how helpless I felt. That if we had a full company, maybe we could have gotten in there faster. Maybe we could have been going in the front door as the same time the truck company was trying to VES. One of us would have gotten there faster, right? I wouldn't have delayed myself trying to throw a ladder to a room to VES a room, and the engine wouldn't have delayed getting water on the fire. So, there's all those what ifs, right? So that was that moment, and that's part of what pushed my career forward to say we have to do something, and I was
powerful fuel.
Yeah, I was a captain at the time, a captain, and I was the only captain. I was first level supervisor, and all I really did was do the schedule and stuff like that. And that's when I said we need somebody in charge on every shift, and we need to do something. And that's when we expanded the department the first time. That was the beginning of where we're at now. Was that moment in time, and it brought us to where we are now, and we still don't have the people to do the job. If I had 100 more guys, I don't think I'd have enough people to do the job, the way I feel we should. Every call should have the correct amount of apparatus responding with the correct amount of people on it, right? The apparatus is one thing. People's what do this job. They're our most important asset is the people. And that's another thing that I won't, we buy all the nicest equipment. There's departments out there that buy the best equipment, right? And it has to be NFPA approved, and you can't wear this. But then they respond with 1 or 2 guys on the rig, and it's like, wait a second.
It's incredible, isn't it?
We won't let you wear a helmet that's not NFPA approved, but man, you can go with 2 people. You can go with 1 guy. I just don't understand it. So the fire service has to stop picking and choosing, and has to start doing. I don't want to say I don't care what the NFPA says. I do care. They have a good point of view on things. I need to supply my apparatus with the amount of people that it needs to do the job correctly, right? And if that's 5 people on a rig or 6 people on a rig, that's where it needs to be, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to do what we need to make this job the best we can for everybody, including our customer, the victims involved in fire.
That's it.
That's it. That's what needs to happen. So shortly thereafter that's when we went to 2 and 2, which we thought was the greatest thing ever. All of us we were like,
Yeah,
wow,
right.
this is amazing what we can get. And then we had a period in 2017 where we had another administrator come in, and he felt like, all right, we're almost there. Let's set the groundwork for an actual fire department to respond. So let's bring that 2 and 2 together and put them on one engine, right? Let's put a fire company together. And we butted heads. I remember arguing with him, not agreeing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Not agreeing.
Absolutely.
I felt like you were taking apparatus off the road. We couldn't be in two places at once anymore. And but he assured me that this is the foundation and this is what you need. And he set the foundation for our department. He really did. He really did. And I see him every now and then. And I always thank him for what he did. And we both wanted the same thing, but we had different ways of getting there. And, he told me, look, John, when I leave here, I want this to be turnkey. I want you to jump into a turnkey position. I really didn't know what he meant when he said that. And I didn't know that he wanted, that he thought that we were going to be in that situation. And that was 2017. And at that time, he kind of pushed me to be a second level supervisor in this role as a captain or battalion chief. And I pushed back hard. I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. My heart was on the rig. My heart's still on the rig. I only ever wanted to be a fireman, and I truly wanted to I aspired, as I became more in my career, I aspired to be a company officer. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to lead a company. I wanted to be a part of that. And that's all. I was where I wanted to be at that time. I was a captain officer on an engine company, and I thought, this is it. I'm retiring from here. This is what I want to do. And he pushed me a little bit, and I pushed back. And in 2018 and into 19, I was still pushing back, and then he ended up resigning to move on to better things. And in early 2020, I was approached by the board, they basically said, look, we need somebody to lead the whole thing. We need a chief of department.
I love it.
And
I love it.
I still said no. I said,
Of course you did.
I said, I don't think and to be honest with you, I didn't feel like I was ready to be a chief officer. I really didn't.
Could be that too.
I really didn't feel ready to be a chief officer for the department's sake. I didn't feel like I was ever good enough. I'm my own worst critic. I still don't feel like I'm good enough. I feel like there's so much more that I could do, and it was a tough thing, because now I'm changing my schedule. We were working 24/72s at that time, and I never wanted to get off that schedule. I had a little side thing going,
now you're going straight days, right?
Yeah. So, and I was like, oh man, I don't know. But then the thought of, I was going to be home for my family a little bit more, and that made it not so bad, because family. Yeah. That family unit, that's so super important. And, I'll never forget my middle daughter in the mid 2000s when I was working the federal government and working part-time in Lakewood. She said to my wife, is Dad coming over and staying over tonight?
Jeez.
That's how much I was out of the house.
Ouch.
That was rough.
Yeah.
And we laughed about it then.
Not easy to hear.
But now,
because all of a sudden, you really got to take a look.
Yeah,
right? What am I doing?
got smacked in the head by a 3-year-old that says, "Dad's staying over tonight," and it was like, wow, I really have to fix my priorities here. And that was in 2007, so that was 11 years prior to or 13 years prior to becoming a chief officer. And I get the best of both worlds now, because I'm still a volley. I get to come back for all the fires because that's my job, and I'm always available, and I work during the day. So in the end, it worked out for me.
I can tell you this, Chief. I think one of the most important conversations we need to have more of is the fact that we're talking about leadership more and more in the fire service, and we're talking about poor leadership. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that some of our best people don't want to move up.
Yeah.
And we need good firemen. We need good firefighters. We need good company officers to promote and get a seat at the table. Because if they don't have a seat at the big table, we're not going to affect change that directly, can support the go-getters, the winners that we have working or volunteering for us. And so we're putting the wrong people up the chain and putting the wrong people at the table. And when we have the wrong people at the table, the message isn't getting out or the mission isn't clear. And that's where we have so many of these problems. And so kudos to you for recognizing all these different things, but you might have not have been ready, but maybe didn't matter. You needed to get there to find your way. And
you touched on a great
it's important.
Point. It wasn't really even kudos to me. It was my current administrator says to me, he says to me,
whoever pushed you.
He says, John, with all due respect, if you don't take the job, we're going to have to find somebody else. And, is that what you really want? Because he knew that I was working to mold the department the way I wanted. And he knew and pushed me basically by saying that, look, if we don't take you, you might be working for somebody else that you don't agree with. And
you might be regretting that decision.
And he pushed me over the edge. And then, the funny thing is I use that with the guys now is if you don't take the exam to promote up, look below you. Not below you on a seniority list, not below you, because even some of my newest guys are some of my best guys.
I get it.
Look down at the lower seniority guys and see which ones you want to work for. Now pick the ones that you don't want to work for. I guarantee you some of the ones you don't want to work for are going to get promoted.
I love that. And that's really good. That's good advice.
That's where you want to, you may not be ready, but it's time to move up to fill those voids because, you said it. If there is a vacuum, something is going to fill that void, right? Right. If you're not doing something, good or bad, is going to fill that, right? So that's
I agree.
So
I wanted to ask you then, right? Because we've been going a bunch, and there was a bunch of things I wanted to get to. We're not even going to get to half of it, but I wanted to ask you this because I know the type of chief you are, and just through the last hour and so on, the passion that you have. Where do so many chiefs go wrong? Like. There's and I don't want to put you on a spot with that, but I think you're the guy to kind of help answer that question for me because I think there becomes this disconnect, and I know you're not disconnected. Your connections are strong.
So I, in my service as a career fire chief, I've met a lot of other fire chiefs. Right now, I think we're lucky in New Jersey. I've there's some bigger departments that have promoted the right guys. I think the problem that happens is exactly what you said, is the wrong guys get promoted because nobody else wants to step up, right? And if the wrong guy gets promoted, I don't think there's anything you can do. There's no amount of leadership classes that can help the wrong guy getting promoted because they're not there for the department. They're there for themselves, right?
Yes.
And I would love to find. I had a letter. I'm going to try and find it real quick because I have this this letter that I kind of live by, and it's an amazing letter, and I want to read it because I never. Let me see if I can find this because this was. Let me see if I can find the story. I put my glasses on. Well, this is the worst part for me.
I go next week for my first eye appointment ever. So I'm gonna need cheaters. I know I do, and I'm not looking forward to it.
That was
Chief.
Me. I realized that so I have it here. So this is a letter from a fire chief, right? So this is dated 28 February 1990, right? So before I even came into fire service, and this is a fire chief from a pretty good department in New Jersey, Camden City Fire Department. This was Chief John Mock. He writes, the Camden Fire Department is 120. This is his retirement letter. He writes, the Camden Fire Department is 121 years old this year. It is a great organization with a very proud history. It, however, has always been important to understand that the department does not belong to us or any of us who currently serve. It instead belongs to all the men who came before us and all those who will come after us. It is to them that we owe our efforts. We that currently serve are only the interim caretakers of a living tradition, each of us having been given the privilege to earn a living while contributing to the institution we call fire department. It is in this spirit and this opportunity I am both honored and grateful. So he's 100% right. We don't own this, right? We owe it to those that came before us and those that come after us. So in other words, we need to pay homage to the history of the department and not forget where we came from. And we need to look forward to teach the next generation, right? So this is where a lot of chiefs go wrong. He also gives a great, excellent second paragraph here, he says, I wish to leave each of you with a few words of advice. Beware of the slimeball tactics of individuals who choose to use the department to improve their personal ambitions. They will not hesitate to jeopardize any of you, your reputation, your job security to achieve their selfish goals. This guy knew it. This guy, I wish I could have met this guy. This guy was a chief that he stood for the guys, and there's not many of him like it. There are some coming up now because I believe that we've taken a shift in the fire service. When I started in the 90s, everything was on the rigs we talked about it, bigger, better. I need a bigger rig. If I have a 1500, I need a 1750. If I have a 1750, I need a 2000.
Right.
A 2500. I need to carry 1,000 gallons of water. I need to carry 1,500 gallons of water. And I always want to look back to our roots is what did we do back in the day? What did the old guys do? How did they do it? Why did they do it? And we look back to that and wow, they had to have tactics that were better than ours because we have so much better equipment, but we fare the same results every time, and they did.
I'm a firm believer history repeats itself.
Yeah. So,
and I think to know where we're going, you have to know where we came from.
That's exactly right. So, and believe it or not, my first year as a fire chief, I didn't do anything but fact find of where we've been. I said,
I love that.
When it was a year. We didn't make a single change in a year. Minor changes, right? Minor changes. That was because we needed to know where we are, right? If you're stuck in the woods and you have a map with you, if you don't know where you are on the map, you have to find out where you are.
Matter.
So you need to know where you are before you can know where you're going, right? So, and to know where you are, you need to know where you've been. And that's important. And that's what, that's what Chief Mock said. He basically said, he's like, we owe this to the guys before us and we owe it to the guys after us. And if a chief understands that his job is to steer the ship and keep everybody safe and also pay homage to the guys that came before him and teach the next generation to do the same, when he leaves, he'll be able to leave comfortably knowing that the department's, going to go in the right direction. We are the interim caretakers of this institution we call fire department. We really are. We're the caretakers. And if you were borrowing your dad's car, man, you wanted to bring it back to him without a scratch, right? Right? Because if you knew what was happening if you crashed that car,
get your ass whooped.
Exactly.
Yep.
100%. So you were the caretaker, right? So you wanted to bring it back. What were you told to do? Bring it back with a full tank of gas, better than when you found it, right? And that's what we need.
I hope a lot of the leadership today listens to this, at least the last 10 minutes of this episode.
Yeah. And I hope we get these guys. Like, I have to push some of my guys, some of my great guys. I have to push because they all feel like, wow, it's moving all too fast. I just want to enjoy my time as a fireman. I'm going to tell you this, that I love the work of a fireman. I love beating a fire. I love stretching a line down that hallway, pushing in and going where nobody else would go and putting that fire out and walking out. There's no better feeling. Well, I found out there is a better feeling. There's a better feeling being an incident commander, watching people you train do that. Because, man, there is nothing better than standing back and watching the guys do what they do without a word on the radio. We tell the guys all the time, those first two engines in truck, I'm not telling you to stretch a line. I'm not telling you to search. You already know it. You're working on standing order. You know your job, do it.
Now go do it.
You know your job, do it.
Yeah.
If something comes up that needs to be done immediately, I'll let you know, hey, I really need you to do this before you finish your search. Or I really need you to find out if the fire's extended, to the adjoining apartment before we decide to put another line in play. We might have to put a line over there. There's so many things that we have to do, but your core function of a job. And that's the other side of the fire services. We're all firefighters, but man, there's two different parts of the fire department. The truck and the engine. There's something to be said about having separate companies. I joke with everyone, like, I said, I'm going to do we're going to hand out at Chief's Dinner, we're going to hand out sporks to everyone because we're going to let them know that quints don't actually work, because if quints worked, the spork would be so much more popular than it is,
I love it.
And because it does everything, right? It does everything, but it does nothing good, right?
Yeah.
You try eating ice cream with a spork, you're never getting all of it. right? So,
You're
you
not.
know,
You're gonna leave some left behind, man.
and there are departments that make quints work. I don't want anyone to take that the wrong way. It takes rigid rules.
Oh, but it's more of a metaphor
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? And I agree with that 100%. I mean, I think you're dead on with that.
I had a picture up that said just because you're unique doesn't mean you're useful, and it's a picture of an axe with a wood head and a steel handle. Right?
I love
Just
it.
because you're unique doesn't mean, just because you're doing something different doesn't mean it's good. Just because, you found a unique thing doesn't mean it's better. There's something to be said for the way things were done 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago, right?
And that is why we need to know.
Uh, um, it was said, in The Bronx is Burning, right? Right. Dennis Smith says, we really haven't found a better way than getting up close and personal to the fire and putting water
That's
on.
it.
And we still haven't found a better way. There is no better way. We still need to do the manual labor of pushing a hand line into a building and putting a fire out. And that's one of the things that Aaron brought to light, was that the the one thing we do at every fire, right? The one thing we do is stretch a hand line and put water on a fire. Every fire in the United States, day in and day out, we're stretching a hand line, put water on a fire. It's the one thing that's not really practiced that much in fire school. So that's one of the things that we have brought to become one of our core functions. You learn how to stretch and operate hand lines in my department before you do anything else. That is the most important thing.
Priorities.
I'm not doing has whopper, and I'm not doing. We're learning how to do. We're learning how to stretch hand lines because before we had a contingent of guys. When you got hired, you got on the rig, and that morning you could go to a fire that morning, right? So you might have been in the academy and did 8 hours of hose line stretches, but you did not do it the way it needs to be done for us to work. So we take them now we set aside 3 weeks to do training for all the new guys that we get, so that they know when they get on the rig, they know how to stretch a hand line. And in that first 3 weeks, they're going to stretch and operate hand lines. Each individual is going to stretch a hand line more than 1,000 times. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it, along with forcing doors and all the other stuff that goes with it. But we set aside 3 days for engine company operations, 3 full days. And that's not even pump ops or, very little on hydrants, because when you sit in that nozzle seat when you start, and because you're directly supervised by the officer. So you are the one stretching the line, and you have to know how to do it. And I can tell you this, the guys will stretch hand lines for 200-300 times, 400 times. They catch their first fire and they fuck it up. And we tell them all the time, it's expected. Right. You're expected.
That's
because
right.
You never did it under live fire. But success
comes from expectations.
Yeah. So we preach to them that, if you didn't do this, think how bad it would have been. You're able to recover. Correct. One of the key things that I explain to my guys in everything, and it's a way to put through. And I took it from my grandfather. Used to say it, because my grandfather was along with being a fireman, he was a really good woodworker, and he always took his time with things. Right. He built furniture. Right. He liked to build. He built my dad's entire bedroom set. Matter of fact, he had the wood shop was set up in the basement of Ladder 27, their old building, and he built everyone in the firehouse's kids' furniture, beds, dressers, everything. That's what they did. Cool. Yeah, it was awesome. Really so cool. He used to, he used to say all the time. He says, "Oh, why is there never enough time to do it right the first time? Why is there always enough time to do it a second time?" Right. So, right. And I tell guys now, one of the big things I say, and it's now caught on because a lot of other guys are saying it, is seconds save minutes. Right. Think about that a little bit. Right. So if we take an extra 30 seconds to make sure that our hand line is flaked correctly and ready to go before we call for water, we just saved ourselves minutes. Because if that's a knot, or if it's kinked up everywhere, once it's charged, it's going to take us minutes to straighten it out. So a few seconds save us minutes. And we do that with everything. Seconds save minutes with everything. We size up a door for forcible entry. If we take a few seconds to size the door up and put our knee into it or put our leg into it to see what locks are actually held, those seconds could save us minutes. And that it works in almost every aspect of the fire services. Slow down a little bit, and take those seconds to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's and that's what we try and teach. And guys make mistakes. We tell them all the time is make mistakes. Just don't do it again.
Yeah.
That's right. Learn. Try not to make the same mistake twice.
What you do. It's what you do with the
Yep.
mistake, right? We're all
Yep.
going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes as a
Yep.
chief, you know, whether it's a clerical
100%.
thing, administration, or on the fire ground. We're all going to make mistakes. What do you do?
Admit it and move
Right?
on.
And
Admit it and fix it.
yeah,
You know, and that's the big one
yeah.
is admit it. Just say, hey, yeah, I screwed up. You know, I definitely screwed that up.
Ownership
Yeah.
matters.
You take ownership of it. Once you take ownership
That's
of it,
right.
you'll never do it again. You'll fix it. And
Yeah, you're accountable.
I have
now.
guys that tell
You're
me
accountable.
before they even, Chief, I fucked up. And I said, what happened? And he says, it won't happen again, I promise. All right, well, tell me what you did. And then, you know, a lot of times it's not as bad as they feel like it is. You know, so they take ownership of it and we move on. I don't hold anybody accountable for making a mistake because, you know, they're held to a standard. Yeah, sure. We hold them to a standard, but that the accountability for a mistake becomes when the mistake becomes caused by unwillingness. Right, unaware, unable, that's fine. We can get past unaware, unable, but unwilling is a problem. Unwilling is where we end up with discipline. And I've never been a big discipline guy. I feel like if you respect the guys and you give them the opportunity to do it, for the most part, everybody in this world that I've run into wants to do the right thing. Right. Yep. They just need the tools to do it. And that's what I like to do. I like to let my people understand that, hey, you're going to make mistakes. We're all going to crash the rig. We're all going to hit things. We're responding. That knock on wood, the fact that we respond in some of the traffic situations that we respond to, and accidents don't happen.
I've seen it.
It boggles my mind that more accidents don't happen. My guys are really good at getting through traffic with the rigs, and they impress me day in and day out. And it's because they're not afraid to make a mistake. You know, they're also not afraid to push a car out of the way if they have to because they're blocking a hydrant.
Because there's an environment there that they know what they can and can't do. The expectations have been set, and you let your people work and make decisions. And I kind of want to wrap with that. I think that what you've been able to do is foster an environment there that promotes firemanship, but it also promotes the individual and the people. It endorses your officers and your firefighters to make decisions that make them the best they can be. Because like you opened with, and what the title of this episode is going to be, we want our people to act.
Yep,
that's it.
100%. We want them to do their job.
Give them the tools, give them the environment, and let your people do what they're supposed to do. That's it. Chief Jonathan Yahr, thank you, brother, man.
Thanks,
what
man.
a great conversation today. We didn't even scratch the surface.
There's a lot more we could talk about. Yeah.
We gotta come back because you are an apparatus guy, and I want to go down that road with you, but we got to do that another time. We're going for an hour and a half already. We could go for this would be a Joe Rogan podcast for 3 hours.
Yeah, we don't do that.
But I know you're busy and so on, but I'd love to have you back on. But I just want to say thank you, man. It was a lot of fun. It was a great conversation, and something I want to leave you with. You mentioned, was it Bud Wallace?
No,
was that one of the senior men?
Bud Soden and Dick Wallace. Yeah, those were two of the guys that. Yeah.
Okay. So those two guys, I want you to realize that you are now becoming them, and that you are leaving everything on the field for the next generation to absorb. And I want you to be conscious of that, because a lot of times guys like you don't realize that until it's too late. And I just want you to be conscious of the fact that you are certainly setting a foundation and environment there where people are going to be able to build off of long after you're gone. Just like those guys stick out to you, you're doing that for people today. So Chief, keep up the good work, man. Thank you. I appreciate the friendship that's grown here. And, I enjoy the fire photos you send my way when you're catching work down there. And Lakewood's a busy shop, man. You guys, Chief, how many runs? Just put it in perspective now. How many runs are you guys doing?
What are we at to this point now? And we don't do EMS. That's what most of the guys, they ask me, how much of that is EMS? We are at 670 runs this year already. So.
So, and you guys, what, 5,000 runs for the engine, I think, in previous year?
Do a little over 4,000. A little over 4,000. Yeah,
4,000 runs. So from 700, from when the conversation started to where you are today, and not too long of a career, it's a whole different shop and a different animal. And thank you for giving a little insight and share with us today about what you guys do in Lakewood and a little bit about yourself. Chief, thank you. Jonathan Yahr, I appreciate you, brother.
Have a good one.
Cool. Stay right here. Don't go anywhere. Don't sign off yet. And let me just sign off the podcast. I'll come right back. Everyone, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. Chief Jonathan Yahr out of the Lakewood, New Jersey Fire Department, a guy that's a true standout and leader in his department and in the fire service in general. What a great conversation. And like I say at the end of every episode, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it, because when we're talking about the job, we're making the job better. I'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.